The ballroom lights shimmered like distant stars as the class reunion unfolded around me, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air, but none of it reached the hollow place in my chest. Then he appeared through the crowd, taller than I remembered, the same quiet intensity in his eyes, and without a word he guided me into a shadowed alcove near the tall windows. His voice was low, almost breaking, when he asked the question that stopped time itself. "Did you ever get my letter?" In that instant every carefully buried memory surged forward, and I knew the night would either mend something long broken or open the wound all over again. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps these stories of the heart reach farther than we ever could alone. I had not seen Marcus Rivera in 23 years, yet the moment his hand lightly touched my elbow the years collapsed. Back in senior year we shared a chemistry lab bench 3 times a week. He was the quiet one who always cleaned the glassware without being asked, who noticed when my titration curves went wrong and gently pointed out the air bubble I had missed. I was the girl who talked too much when I was nervous, who brought extra snacks because I sensed he sometimes skipped lunch, who felt my pulse race every time our fingers brushed over a shared beaker. We never spoke of the feeling that hung between us like the faint scent of ethanol and possibility. I told myself it was just friendship, that someone as steady and brilliant as Marcus could never look at me that way. After graduation we drifted. I went east for nursing school, he stayed west for engineering. Christmas cards stopped after the first few years. Life filled with other people, other almost loves, other quiet disappointments. I married once briefly to a kind man who never quite understood why I sometimes stared out windows as if waiting for a letter that never came. The marriage ended without bitterness, only the soft ache of realizing I had been searching for a voice I no longer heard. Standing in that alcove now, older, the faint lines around his eyes matching the ones I saw in my own mirror, Marcus told me what he had done the week before graduation. He had written a letter by hand, 3 pages of careful script, confessing that every lab session had been the brightest part of his day, that he had rehearsed conversations he never dared start, that he loved the way I laughed when an experiment finally worked, and the way I refused to give up even when the results refused to cooperate. He had slipped the envelope into my locker on the last day of school, the same locker that always stuck a little and sometimes needed a firm shove. He waited by the parking lot afterward, heart pounding, but I never appeared. Classes ended, summer began, silence followed. I listened, the reunion noise fading to a distant hum, and felt the floor tilt beneath me. I remembered that locker. On the final day someone had jammed a thick stack of yearbooks into the top shelf, and when I finally forced it open everything tumbled out in a cascade of paper and plastic. I gathered what I could, shoved the rest back in frustration, and left for the senior picnic without checking carefully. Somewhere in that chaos his letter must have fallen, been swept away by the janitor, or simply vanished into the dust of a building that would later be renovated and renamed. I never found it. I never knew it existed. All those years I had carried the quiet belief that the connection had been only mine, a one-sided secret I was too afraid to name. The loneliness of that misunderstanding settled over me like a second skin I had worn without realizing its weight. Marcus's face softened as he watched understanding dawn. He said he had almost asked me outright a dozen times, but pride and the fear of ruining our easy partnership kept the words locked inside. After high school he tried to move on. He built a career designing medical devices, married a woman who was good and bright, raised 2 children who now sent him proud photos from college. The marriage had ended 5 years earlier when the quiet spaces between them grew too wide. He never stopped wondering about the letter. On nights when the house felt too large he would sometimes open the drawer where he kept the carbon copy he had made for himself, reading the words he once hoped would change everything. Coming to the reunion had been an impulse he almost canceled twice, yet something pulled him here. The same something that once made him stay late in the lab just to walk out beside me into the evening air. I told him about the years that followed for me, the long night shifts in the ICU, the patients whose hands I held when families could not arrive in time, the way I sometimes still looked for a certain thoughtful expression in a stranger's face. I spoke of the quiet evenings after my divorce when the silence felt familiar, almost like the silence after the last lab period when the building emptied and only the 2 of us remained putting equipment away. I admitted that I had written him letters in my mind more times than I could count, letters that began with "I wish I had been braver" and ended with "I hope you found happiness." None of them were ever mailed. Courage, it seemed, had always arrived too late or not at all. We stood there for a long while as the reunion continued without us. Outside the windows the city lights blinked like patient stars. Inside, something careful and new began to take shape between the 2 people we had become. He asked if I still kept a notebook the way I used to, filled with half-finished thoughts and coffee stains. I laughed for the first time that night and said yes, and that the latest one still had a blank page reserved for questions I never expected to answer. He smiled, the same small smile I remembered from the day our experiment finally succeeded after 3 failed attempts. The smile that said the effort had been worth every setback. Later we walked the quiet streets near the hotel, talking the way we once had over bubbling solutions and shared textbooks. The conversation moved easily from old memories to the lives we had lived apart, the lessons learned in the long spaces between. I told him about the patient who taught me that sometimes the most important thing is simply to stay present even when you cannot fix what is broken. He spoke of the prototype that failed spectacularly in testing and how the failure eventually led to a better design that now helped children breathe more easily. We discovered that both of us had carried a private grief for the path not taken, and that the grief had softened over time into something quieter, almost companionable. Under a street lamp he stopped and said he still had the carbon copy of that letter if I wanted to read the words that never reached me. I nodded, throat tight, and he promised to bring it the next day. The following morning we met in a small cafe near the park. He placed the folded pages on the table between us. The paper had yellowed at the edges, the ink still clear. I read every line slowly, feeling the young man he had been speaking directly to the young woman I once was. When I finished, tears I had not expected slipped down my face. Not tears of regret alone, but of recognition, of two people who had almost found each other and were being given the rare chance to try again with older, wiser hearts. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his, the same careful touch he once used when adjusting a delicate instrument. No grand declarations were needed. The years had already spoken for us. In the weeks that followed we wrote real letters this time, long emails that sometimes stretched into late-night phone calls. We visited each other's cities. We met each other's grown children, who regarded us with the amused tolerance of the young for their parents' unexpected happiness. The path was not free of difficulty. Old habits of solitude sometimes rose like walls. Fear of losing what we had only just begun to rebuild made us cautious. Yet every time doubt appeared we returned to the simple truth of that missing letter. Life is full of lost messages, but it is also full of second deliveries if we are willing to open the door when they finally arrive. Now more than a year after the reunion, Marcus and I share a small house near the coast where the morning light falls across a kitchen table often covered with notebooks and half-finished sketches of devices that might one day help someone breathe easier. We still argue gently over the best way to clean glassware. We still stay up too late talking about nothing and everything. And sometimes, when the evening is quiet, he will take my hand and ask if I ever got his letter, and I will answer that I did, finally, completely, and just in time. If this story has touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment sharing what it meant to you, and subscribe so that more stories of quiet courage and second chances can find their way to those who need them. Your engagement keeps this little corner of kindness alive. Before we close, I have one special request. If there is someone in your life you once left words unspoken to, or a letter you wish you had written, leave a comment below telling us, without names if you prefer, what you would say if you could send that message today. Your words might give someone else the courage to do the same. May every lost letter eventually find its way home, and may every heart that has waited in silence discover it was never truly alone.